I stood at the mirror, adjusting my collar for the third time, my hands trembling slightly. 30 years. 30 years of wondering, of imagining her face, of rehearsing this moment in my mind. The envelope in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. DNA results that would either confirm what I already knew or shatter the fragile hope I'd carried since I was old enough to understand what abandoned meant. Outside, a car horn blared, snapping me back. I grabbed my keys and headed out, not knowing that the woman who left me on those church steps as a newborn was about to learn that some debts can't be outrun forever. But this isn't a story about revenge. Not really. It's about something far more complicated than that. If you're new here, welcome to Every Smile Hides a Story. We're just getting started, and we'll have a new story for you every single day. Real moments that remind us how much more there is beneath the surface. If this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button. You won't regret it. My name is David, and I grew up knowing exactly one thing about my mother. She didn't want me. The nuns at St. Catherine's told me I was found on a cold February morning, wrapped in a yellow blanket with a note pinned to it. Please take care of him. I can't. 5 words that shaped 30 years of my life. 5 words I read so many times the photocopy they gave me on my 18th birthday was nearly transparent from handling. I had good foster parents, Mary and Tom Chen, who took me in when I was 3 and never made me feel like anything less than their son. They gave me love, stability, a college education. Mary would make these elaborate birthday cakes every year, spending hours in the kitchen getting the decorations just right. Tom taught me how to ride a bike, how to change a tire, how to shake someone's hand with confidence. They were everything parents should be. But there was always this hollow space inside me, this question mark where other people had origin stories. Who was I? Where did I come from? Why wasn't I enough? I'd see other kids with their biological parents and feel this strange combination of gratitude for Mary and Tom, and this gnawing ache for something I'd never had. It's hard to explain to someone who's never felt it, how you can be loved and still feel incomplete. In high school, I went through a phase where I was angry all the time. Not at Mary and Tom, they didn't deserve that, but at the world, at fate, at the faceless woman who'd decided I wasn't worth keeping. I got into fights. My grades slipped. Tom sat me down one night, his weathered hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and said, "Son, I know you're hurting. I know there's a part of your story we can't give you, but being angry at people who aren't here just poisons you from the inside out." He was right, of course. I got my act together, went to college, built a decent life, got a job as an accountant, stable, boring, exactly the kind of future Mary and Tom had worked so hard to give me. But that question never left. It just learned to whisper instead of scream. I hired a private investigator when I turned 28. It took him 14 months and most of my savings, but he found her, Margaret Holloway, living in a modest split level in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, married to a man named Richard, some kind of middle manager at an insurance company. 2 children, my half-siblings, I realized with a strange jolt. She had built a whole life, a whole family, while I grew up wondering if I'd done something wrong in the womb to make her leave me. The investigator gave me a folder with photos. Margaret at the grocery store, Margaret in her garden, Margaret picking up her daughter from school. Normal, mundane, utterly ordinary, and somehow that made it worse. She wasn't suffering. She wasn't trapped in some terrible circumstance. She was just living, as if I'd never existed. The anger came back then, after the shock wore off. How dare she? How dare she move on? Have other children? Live comfortably while I spent my childhood wondering what was so broken about me that my own mother couldn't keep me? I spent months wrestling with what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to show up at her door and scream. Part of me wanted to ruin her perfect little life the way mine had felt ruined. But I'm not cruel. Or at least, I didn't think I was. I decided on something more calculated. I would confront her, yes, but I would make her face what she'd done. I would stand there with proof, with my existence, and watch her squirm. Maybe I'd meet these half-siblings of mine, let them know their mother had a dirty little secret. The thought gave me a grim satisfaction that probably should have worried me more than it did. I told myself I just wanted answers, just wanted to understand. But looking back now, I can see the truth. I wanted her to hurt the way I'd hurt. I wanted her to feel what it was like to have your world turned upside down by information you couldn't control. I chose a Saturday morning in October. The kind of day where the air smells like wood smoke and dying leaves, where everything feels both beautiful and melancholy. I'd driven the 3 hours from my apartment in Cincinnati the night before, stayed in a cheap motel where the mattress sagged in the middle and the walls were thin enough to hear every word of the couple arguing next door. I barely slept, just lay there staring at the water-stained ceiling, going over what I'd say, practicing my lines like an actor preparing for the role of a lifetime. "Hello, Mother. Remember me? The baby you threw away?" Too dramatic. "Hi, I'm David. I think we need to talk about February 1995. Too casual. Nothing felt right because nothing about this situation was right. I parked 2 houses down and watched the Holloway residence for 20 minutes, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The house was well maintained, but not fancy. Vinyl siding the color of cream, a garden that had been cared for, but was now putting itself to bed for winter. A small maple tree in the front yard blazed red-orange in the morning light. A child's bike lay on its side near the garage, one wheel still spinning slightly in the breeze. A girl who looked about 16 came out, backpack slung over one shoulder, climbed into a beat-up Honda and drove away. One of my half-siblings. The reality of it hit me fresh. She had no idea she had a brother. No idea her mother was keeping this massive secret. What was that like? I wondered. Growing up with both your parents, with siblings, with this complete sense of belonging I'd never had. When I finally walked up the driveway, my legs felt disconnected from my body. Each step felt both too fast and not fast enough. The doorbell made a cheerful chiming sound that seemed absurdly at odds with what I was about to do. I heard footsteps inside, growing closer, and had a sudden wild urge to run. The door opened. She was older than the grainy photos the investigator had found, her dark hair threaded with silver, lines around her eyes and mouth. But I knew her. Or rather, I knew we shared the same slightly crooked nose, the same wide-set eyes, the same way of standing with one hip slightly cocked. Looking at her was like looking into a future version of myself, and it made my stomach twist. "Can I help you?" Her voice was cautious, polite. The voice of someone who answered the door to strangers regularly, expecting Girl Scouts selling cookies or neighbors asking to borrow a ladder. "Margaret Holloway?" I managed to keep my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "Yes?" A small line appeared between her eyebrows, uncertainty creeping in. I pulled out the envelope, and this was it, the moment I'd been building toward for months. "My name is David Chen. I think you knew me by a different name 30 years ago. Actually, you didn't give me any name at all. You just left me on the steps of St. Catherine's Church with a note." I watched the color drain from her face, watched her hand go to the door frame, gripping it like she might fall. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. In that moment, I felt a surge of something dark and satisfied. Good. Let her feel it. Let her know what it's like to have your world tilt sideways. "No," she finally whispered, and it came out strangled, desperate. "Yes." I opened the envelope and pulled out the DNA results, held them up where she could see the official letterhead, the percentages that proved beyond any doubt that we shared DNA. "I found you, and I think we need to talk." For a long moment, she just stared at me. I saw a dozen emotions flicker across her face. Shock, fear, something that might have been grief. Her breathing had gone shallow and quick. Then her expression hardened in a way I hadn't expected, like a door slamming shut. "You need to leave." "I'm not leaving. You owe me answers." "I don't owe you anything." Her voice was cold now, defensive, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "That was a closed adoption. You have no right." "It wasn't an adoption. You abandoned me. There's a difference." I took a step closer, and she flinched back slightly. "You left me like garbage, like something you couldn't wait to get rid of. And I want to know why." A man's voice called from inside the house. "Margaret? Who is it?" She flinched again, harder this time. "Just someone selling something. Give me a minute." She stepped onto the porch and pulled the door closed behind her, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. "You can't be here. My family doesn't know about you. I'm your family." "No." The word came out sharp, cutting. "No. You're a mistake I made 30 years ago, and I did what I had to do. Now you need to leave before you ruin everything I've built." The words hit like a physical blow. A mistake. After all my imaginings, all the possible scenarios I'd constructed, maybe she was too young, maybe she was sick, maybe she had been forced to give me up. I had never really let myself believe she simply hadn't wanted me. But here it was, delivered in a cold whisper on a suburban porch while a wind chime tinkled somewhere nearby. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me why," I said, and I heard my voice crack despite my best efforts. "I deserve to know why. What was so wrong with me that you couldn't even try?" "Nothing was wrong with you. Everything was wrong with me." Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But she crossed her arms over her chest, defensive. "I was 17. I wasn't ready. That's all you need to know. That's not enough. It's going to have to be." She reached for the door handle, and I could see her hands shaking now too. I don't know what possessed me in that moment. Desperation, maybe. Rage. The accumulated weight of 30 years of questions and a lifetime of feeling like I wasn't quite enough. "I could tell them," I said, my voice low and mean. "Your husband, your kids. I could tell them all about the son you threw away. How would that perfect little family of yours handle that truth?" She froze, her hand on the door. When she turned back to me, her face was twisted with an emotion I couldn't quite read. Rage, terror, something else I didn't have a name for. "If you do that," she said quietly, each word precise and cold, "I will deny everything. I'll tell them you're a con artist, a lunatic trying to extort money from us. I'll call the police. You'll get nothing but a restraining order and maybe a psychiatric evaluation. Is that what you want?" We stood there, locked in a standoff that felt like it might shatter both of us. The October wind picked up, rattling the leaves in the gutter, carrying the smell of someone's Saturday morning bacon. Normal life continuing around us while we stood in this bubble of mutual destruction. "Why?" I asked again, and this time my voice was just tired, all the anger bleeding out, leaving just this hollow ache. "Just tell me why, and I'll leave. That's all I want. Just the truth." For a second I thought she might. Her mouth opened, and I saw something almost like anguish cross her face, saw her eyes fill with tears. But then the door opened behind her, and a man in his 50s looked out. Her husband, I assumed. Thinning hair, kind face, wearing a golf shirt and looking utterly confused. "Everything okay out here?" Margaret's face smoothed into a pleasant mask so quickly it was like watching a magician's trick. The transformation was unsettling, seeing how easily she could hide what she was feeling. "Fine. Just someone looking for the Hendersons. I told him they're 2 streets over." The man looked at me, friendly but puzzled. Easy to get turned around in these neighborhoods. All the streets look the same. "You need directions?" I looked at Margaret. She stared back at me, her eyes hard, pleading, desperate. In that moment, I realized I had the power to destroy her entire world with a single sentence. It would be so easy, so satisfying. All I had to do was say, "Actually, I'm your wife's son, the one she abandoned 30 years ago." The words were right there, on the tip of my tongue. I could taste them. "No," I heard myself say. "I'm good. Sorry to bother you." I walked back to my car with my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring at nothing, feeling like I might throw up. That was it then. My big confrontation. My moment of truth. And all I'd gotten was confirmation that I was unwanted, that I was an inconvenience she'd spent 3 decades trying to forget, and that she was willing to fight dirty to keep me buried. Why hadn't I said anything? Why had I let her win? I told myself it was because I wasn't cruel enough to destroy an innocent family just to hurt her. But the truth was more complicated. In that moment, seeing her terror, her desperation to protect the life she'd built, I'd seen myself. Seen what I'd become in my quest for answers. Someone willing to hurt people, who'd done nothing wrong, just to make myself feel better. It didn't help. I still felt hollow. Still felt like that baby on the church steps, unwanted and alone. I drove home in a fog. The 3-hour drive back to Cincinnati passed in a blur of highway and half-formed thoughts. I kept replaying the conversation, thinking of all the things I should have said, all the ways I could have made her understand what she'd done to me. The apartment felt too quiet when I got there. Every sound amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock on the wall, the upstairs neighbor's footsteps crossing their living room. I sat on the couch and pulled out the note again, the one they'd given me copies of when I turned 18. "Please take care of him. I can't." I must have read it 100 times that night, looking for something I'd missed, some hidden meaning that would make it hurt less. The handwriting was neat, careful, not rushed or panicked. She'd taken the time to write clearly, to make sure whoever found me would understand. But understand what? That she couldn't, or that she wouldn't. The next few days, I went through the motions. Work, home, sleep. My boss asked if I was feeling okay. I'd been staring at the same spreadsheet for 20 minutes without doing anything. I told him I was fine, just tired. Tom and Mary called. They always seemed to know when I was struggling, and I lied and said everything was great. I wasn't ready to tell them I'd found her. Wasn't ready to admit how badly it had gone, how I'd threatened to ruin her life, and then chickened out at the last second. Mary knew anyway. She always did. "You know you can talk to us about anything," she said before we hung up. "Even the hard things. Especially the hard things. I know, Mom. I'm okay. Really. But I wasn't okay." I kept seeing Margaret's face, the way it had transformed from terror to that pleasant mask when her husband appeared. What kind of person could do that? What kind of person could hide something that huge for 30 years? And what did it say about me that I'd inherited her genes, her crooked nose, her way of standing? A week later, I found myself parked outside her house again. I didn't plan it. I'd told myself I was going for a drive to clear my head, and somehow the drive took me 3 hours north to Columbus, to this quiet suburban street where my birth mother lived her secret-filled life. I watched. Just watched. Told myself I was trying to understand, to see what kind of life she had, what had been more important than keeping me. It wasn't healthy. I knew that, but I couldn't seem to stop. I saw her come home from the grocery store around 4 in the afternoon, struggling with bags that seemed too heavy. She dropped one, and apples rolled across the driveway. She stood there for a moment, just looking at them, and I saw her shoulders sag. Then the teenage girl, my half-sister, came running out, laughing, helped her gather the apples and carry everything inside. Margaret said something I couldn't hear, and the girl laughed harder, bumping her mother with her hip as they went through the door. I felt like I was watching a movie of a life I should have had. The casual intimacy, the laughter, the belonging. Did she help that girl with her homework? Did she make her elaborate birthday cakes the way Mary had made for me? Did she stay up worrying when her daughter was out late? The thought made something hot and bitter rise in my throat. She could do it for them, could be a mother to them. So what had been wrong with me? I came back 3 days later, and then again the following week. I knew it was creepy, bordering on stalking, but I couldn't let it go, couldn't stop trying to understand. That's when I started to notice things, small things, the way Margaret's smile never quite reached her eyes, the way she startled when her husband came up behind her, even though he was only trying to help her with the dishes. I'd parked closer this time, could see through the kitchen window, the careful way she moved through her own house, like she was always aware of where everyone was, always calculating. And there were moments, brief flashes when she thought no one was looking, where the mask slipped. I saw her standing at the kitchen sink one evening, just standing there with her hands in the soapy water, staring out the window at nothing, tears streaming down her face, completely silent. Then, her daughter called from another room, and she wiped her face with her sleeve, put the smile back on, called back something cheerful. The third time I sat outside her house, I know, it was getting seriously problematic. I saw something that changed everything. It was late afternoon, golden light slanting through the trees, making everything look soft and nostalgic. Margaret came out to get the mail, and stood there at the end of the driveway for a long moment, just holding it, staring at nothing, and then her face crumpled. Just for a second, just long enough for me to see the absolute devastation underneath the careful mask she wore. She pressed one hand to her mouth like she was holding back a scream, and her whole body shook. Her other hand crushed the envelopes she was holding, wrinkling them. She looked like someone drowning, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Then she straightened up, smoothed her expression, organized the mail back into a neat stack, and went back inside. The whole thing lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it was enough. I sat there in my car, stunned. That wasn't the face of a woman who'd callously abandoned a baby and moved on without a care. That wasn't the face of someone who'd simply been too young or too inconvenienced to be a mother. That was the face of someone carrying a grief so heavy it had bent her spine, broken something fundamental inside her. What had happened to her? What had made a 17-year-old girl leave her newborn on church steps? And more importantly, why did it still hurt her this much 3 decades later? I started digging deeper, not just into Margaret's present, but into her past. I took time off work, told my boss I needed a mental health week. He looked at me with concern but didn't pry, just told me to take care of myself. I pulled high school records, old newspaper archives, anything I could find from 30 years ago, and slowly, piece by terrible piece, a different story began to emerge. Margaret Holloway, née Martin, born in Columbus in 1978, honor roll student at Lincoln High School. Volleyball team. There was a photo in the 1994 yearbook of her spiking a ball, caught midair, grinning. She'd been voted most likely to succeed by her junior class. There were quotes from her in the school newspaper about wanting to be a lawyer, about changing the world. Her mother, Patricia Martin, had died when Margaret was 14. Cancer, the obituary said. Patricia had been a teacher, beloved by her students. The photo showed a woman with Margaret's smile, her eyes. Survived by her husband Robert and daughter Margaret. After that, Margaret had been raised by her father alone. Robert Martin, construction worker. The few photos I could find showed a big man, broad-shouldered, with a hard face. He never smiled in pictures. And then, in the spring of her junior year, spring of 1995, right when she would have been pregnant with me, Margaret had simply vanished from school records, withdrawn in March. No explanation given, no graduation photos, no mention of where she'd gone. I couldn't find any record of her again until she was 21, when she'd gotten married to Richard Holloway and started using his name. It was like she'd disappeared for 4 years and then re-emerged as a different person. A person who smiled carefully and startled easily and hid grief behind her eyes. I hired the investigator again, asked him to find out more about Robert Martin. What he found made my blood run cold. Robert Martin had been killed 30 years ago, in the house he'd shared with his daughter. March 15th, 1995. The official report said home invasion, but there had been whispers. The investigator found them in old forums, in archived true crime discussions, in the comments section of a local news article from that time, that something wasn't right about the case. The scene had been messy, violent. Robert Martin had died from blunt force trauma to the head, sustained over multiple impacts. Margaret had been found covered in blood, nearly catatonic, clutching a ceramic lamp in her hands. She'd been questioned extensively by police, but never charged. I found a detective who'd worked the case, now retired. He was reluctant to talk at first, but I told him I was writing a true crime article. We met at a diner, and he sat across from me nursing a coffee that had gone cold while he talked. "That case stuck with me," he said, staring at something beyond my shoulder. "I've worked homicides for 30 years, and that one still keeps me up sometimes. The girl, Margaret, she was 17, small, maybe 110 pounds. The father was 6'2", 220, all muscle from construction work, and she'd beaten him to death with a lamp. Self-defense?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He nodded slowly. "That's what we concluded. The evidence was there. Bruises on her arms, defensive wounds on her hands, signs of sexual assault. We found evidence of long-term abuse, too. Neighbors reported hearing fights. Teachers said she'd become withdrawn, started wearing long sleeves even in summer, but she wouldn't talk, just sat there shaking, staring at nothing. Shock, the psychiatrist said. Trauma. What happened to her after? Foster care for a few months. She was almost 18, and she had no other family. Then she just disappeared. Changed her name, I think. Can't say I blame her. That kind of thing follows you. People whisper. They always wonder if you're telling the truth. If maybe you're the monster instead of the victim. I thanked him and left, feeling sick. I sat in my car in that diner parking lot for an hour, trying to process what I'd learned. And then, barely 2 months after Robert Martin's death, a baby boy had been left at St. Catherine's Church. No name, just a note. Please take care of him. I can't. The timeline fit perfectly. Horribly. Margaret had killed her father in mid-March. I'd been born, according to the records from St. Catherine's, in early May, left at the church 2 days later. I sat in my apartment that night with these puzzle pieces spread out before me, and I finally understood. Margaret hadn't been a careless teenager who'd gotten pregnant and decided she didn't want to deal with a baby. She'd been a traumatized girl who'd killed her own father. And the dates, the timeline, the sealed records, everything pointed to why. She'd been raped by her own father. I was the result of that rape, and she'd killed him to make it stop. I'd come to her house demanding answers, calling her cruel, threatening to destroy her family, and all along, I'd been the living reminder of the worst thing that had ever happened to her. Every time she looked at me, she must have seen him, must have felt it all over again. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Sat on the cold tile floor afterward, shaking, crying, not sure if I was mourning for her, or for myself, or for the father I'd never known, but who'd been a monster. No wonder she couldn't keep me. No wonder she'd looked at me with such fear. I wasn't just a baby. I was a walking nightmare, a physical manifestation of her trauma, and I'd threatened to ruin her life, threatened to expose her to her family, to drag all of this horror back into the light. I'd been so focused on my own pain that I hadn't even considered what hers might be. I didn't go back to her house. I couldn't. Not with this knowledge. How do you confront someone with that? How do you force them to relive their worst nightmare just so you can have closure? How do you tell someone you're sorry for being born? But Margaret found me instead. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after my first visit to her house. I'd just gotten home from work, was sitting on my couch eating takeout Chinese food, straight from the container, not even bothering with a plate. Someone knocked on my apartment door, and when I opened it, she was standing there. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like something had collapsed inside her, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing jeans and a sweater that looked like it had been put on in a hurry. "How did you find me?" I asked stupidly, because it was the only thing my brain could process in that moment. "You're not the only one who can hire an investigator." Her voice was quiet, drained of the defensive anger I'd heard before. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked past me into my small living room and stood there, looking around at my life, my secondhand furniture, the photo of Tom and Mary on the bookshelf, the stacks of books I'd been meaning to organize for months, the Chinese food container I'd left on the coffee table, steam still rising from it. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, still not looking at me, "about deserving to know why. You were right. You do. You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She finally turned to face me, and her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "I've spent 30 years trying to forget, trying to pretend you never existed, but you're here now, and you have a right to understand, even though it's going to hurt both of us, maybe especially because of that." She sat down on my couch, and I sat across from her in the armchair. The evening light was fading, casting long shadows across the room. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of traffic, children playing, normal life continuing while we sat in this strange, suspended moment. "I was 17, she started, and her voice was so quiet I had to lean forward to hear her. "My mom had died 3 years earlier, and it was just me and my dad. Everyone thought he was a good man, hard worker, went to church every Sunday, never missed a day of work, the kind of man people respected." She paused, her hands twisting together in her lap. I noticed her nails were bitten down to the quick. But after Mom died, something changed in him. Or maybe it was always there, and she'd protected me from it. I don't know. I'll never know. Her voice broke slightly. "He started drinking more, getting angry. Mom used to be the buffer, you know? She'd smooth things over, calm him down. Without her, there was nothing between us." She took a shaky breath. "It started small, yelling, blaming me for things. Then it was harder, punishing me for tiny things, making me kneel on rice for an hour if I forgot to do a chore. By the time I was 16, I was walking on eggshells all the time, trying to be perfect, trying not to set him off. I felt my stomach turning, knowing where this was going but hoping desperately I was wrong. And then one night, just after I turned 17, he came into my room. She was staring at her hands now, unable to meet my eyes. It wasn't the first time, but it was the worst. I'd been trying to keep my door locked, but he'd taken the lock off weeks before. I fought back that time, really fought. There was a lamp next to my bed, heavy ceramic, blue with white flowers. My mom had bought it years before. I can still see it perfectly. Her voice had gone flat, emotionless, like she was describing something that had happened to someone else. I recognized it from my psychology classes in college. Dissociation, the mind's way of protecting itself from unbearable pain. I hit him, kept hitting him. I don't even remember deciding to do it. I just remember the sound, this wet thud, over and over, and then silence. This terrible, complete silence. And I realized what I'd done. She pressed her hands to her face. The police believed me. They saw the bruises, the torn clothes, the evidence of what he'd been doing. There was so much evidence they couldn't ignore it. But I knew everyone else would wonder, would whisper, would always see me as the girl who killed her father. Monster. That's what they called me at school before I left. That's what someone spray-painted on our house before social services moved me to a temporary placement. You don't have to tell me the rest, I said quietly, but she shook her head. No, you need to know all of it. You need to understand. She looked at me finally, and the pain in her eyes was almost unbearable to witness. I found out I was pregnant about a month after he died. I'd missed my period, but I thought it was stress. I wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping. But then I started feeling sick, and a social worker took me to a clinic. She wiped at her eyes roughly. When they told me, I threw up right there in the office, because I knew exactly when it had happened, exactly what it meant. You weren't just a baby. You were proof, physical, undeniable proof of what he'd done to me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and horrible. I couldn't, her voice cracked completely. I couldn't look at you without seeing him, without feeling everything he'd done to me, without reliving that night over and over. I was 17 and alone and so broken, and I couldn't give you what you needed. I couldn't even take care of myself. I was having nightmares every night, panic attacks during the day. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The foster family I was with tried to help, but I was drowning. So you left me at the church, I said softly, my own voice thick with unshed tears. I left you somewhere safe, somewhere people would find you quickly and love you and give you a life that wasn't marked by what he did. I thought I was protecting you, from me, from the truth, from the stigma of being, she couldn't finish the sentence, from being what I am, I finished for her, from being defined by how you came into this world instead of who you are. You deserved better than that, better than me, damaged and broken and unable to look at my own child without falling apart. She looked at me with devastated eyes. I'm so sorry. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am so sorry for leaving you, for not being strong enough, for all of it. We sat in silence for a long moment. The shadows in the room had deepened. Neither of us moved to turn on a light. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. Did you ever think about me? I asked finally. Every day. Her voice cracked. Every single day. I'd see kids your age and wonder if that's what you looked like. I'd celebrate your birthday alone, in my head, light a candle and make a wish that you were happy, that you were loved, that you'd never have to know where you came from. She pulled something from her purse, a photo, worn at the edges from handling. She handed it to me. It showed a tiny baby wrapped in a yellow blanket, eyes closed, peaceful. Me, I realized, in my first hours of life. I took this before I left you. I needed to remember that you were real, that you existed, because part of me wanted to pretend none of it had happened. The rape, the murder, the pregnancy, all of it. But you were real. You were innocent, and you deserved to exist somewhere, even if it couldn't be with me. I stared at the photo, at this baby who would become me, and felt tears streaming down my face. You kept this for 30 years? In a box in my closet, hidden where Richard would never find it. Sometimes I'd take it out late at night and just look at you. Try to imagine what kind of person you'd become. Hope you were happy. Pray you'd never find me and have to learn the truth. Why didn't you come looking for me? Because I was a coward. Because I was afraid you'd hate me. Because I thought you were better off without me in your life, dragging all of this darkness with me. And because part of me, the broken, damaged part, was terrified that if I saw you, I'd see him. She wiped her eyes. But I was wrong. I'm looking at you now, and all I see is the baby I held for 5 minutes before I had to let go. All I see is the child I loved enough to give up. All I see is my son. The words broke something open in both of us. I started crying in earnest then, and so did she. We sat there in my darkening apartment, two strangers bound by blood and trauma, mourning all the years we'd lost to fear and shame. When you showed up at my door, she said after a while, I panicked. All I could think was that I'd ruin your life the way mine was ruined. that I'd contaminate your happiness with my history, so I tried to push you away, to protect you from me one more time. But I can see now that I only hurt you more. I hired an investigator, I admitted. I found out about your father, about what happened. She drew in a sharp breath, her hand going to her throat. Then you know. You know what you came from. I know what he did to you. That's not what I came from. I leaned forward, needing her to hear this. You protected yourself. You survived. And then you made an impossible choice trying to protect me too. That's what I came from. A woman who was strong enough to survive and selfless enough to give me a chance at a better life. You shouldn't have to carry that, she whispered. The knowledge of how you were conceived. That's a burden no one should have to bear. Neither should you. But we both do now. And maybe, I swallowed hard, maybe we don't have to carry it alone anymore. She looked at me with something like hope, fragile and tentative, like a bird with a broken wing trying to fly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve to ask for it. But I want you to know that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. And not a day has gone by that I haven't loved you. Even from a distance. Even in secret. Even when I was too broken to show it. I had good parents, I told her. Mary and Tom Chen. They gave me everything. Love, stability, a home. They taught me what family means. But there was always this empty space. This question I couldn't answer. And now I can. What will you do? She asked quietly. With all of this information? With the truth? I didn't have an easy answer. This wasn't the confrontation I'd imagined. There was no satisfaction in her pain. No vindication in her suffering. There was just two people, both wounded by the same monster, trying to figure out how to move forward. I don't know, I admitted. This is going to take time. To process. To understand. Maybe to forgive. Both you and myself for all the anger I've carried. For the things I said to you. For the way I threatened you. You had every right to be angry. Maybe. But anger doesn't change what happened. It doesn't heal anything. It just keeps us both trapped in that moment 30 years ago. I ran my hand through my hair, suddenly exhausted. I think I need to start by letting go of the anger. And maybe you need to let go of the guilt. I don't know if I can, she whispered. I've carried it for so long. It's become part of who I am. Then maybe we figure it out together. The words surprised me even as I said them. Not to fix everything, because I don't think everything can be fixed, but to just know each other, without all the secrets, without all the shame. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face, and for the first time, I saw what might have been underneath all these years. Not a woman who'd callously abandoned me, but a girl who'd been broken and had tried, in her broken way, to save us both. I'd like that, she whispered. I'd really like that. But David, you need to understand. If we do this, if we build some kind of relationship, it's going to be complicated. I have a family who doesn't know about you. A husband who thinks he knows my whole story. Children who have no idea they have a brother. Are you going to tell them? She was quiet for a long moment. I think I have to. Not all of it, maybe. Some things they're better off not knowing. But yes, they need to know about you. They deserve to know. And you deserve to not be a secret anymore. That's going to be hard. Everything about this is hard. But I think carrying secrets is harder than facing truth, even when the truth is ugly. She stood up, smoothing her jeans with shaking hands. I should go. Richard thinks I'm at the grocery store. I need to figure out how to tell him that's not where I've been. I stood too, and we faced each other awkwardly. Were we supposed to hug? Shake hands? The social conventions for this situation didn't exist. Thank you for coming here, I said finally. For telling me the truth. I know it wasn't easy. Thank you for listening. For not hating me. That's more than I deserve. She turned toward the door, then stopped. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy? Did you have a good life? Were Mary and Tom good to you? I thought about Mary's birthday cakes, Tom's patient teaching, the thousands of small moments of love that had shaped me. Yes, they gave me everything. I had a really good life. Relief washed over her face, and she smiled for the first time since arriving. A real smile. Not the careful mask I'd seen before. Good. That's all I ever wanted. That's what made it bearable. Thinking that somewhere you were happy and loved and whole. I was. I am. I paused. But there was always something missing. And now, maybe that hole can start to heal. Maybe for both of us, she said softly. After she left, I sat in the dark for a long time, holding the photo she'd given me, the baby and the yellow blanket, unaware of the complicated, painful story he'd been born into, unaware that the woman who'd held him had loved him enough to let him go. I thought about the investigator's words, about how Margaret had nearly died keeping me, about the 9 months she'd carried me while reliving her trauma every single day. She could have ended the pregnancy. No one would have blamed her. But she'd chosen to let me live, even though every day of that pregnancy must have been torture. That wasn't a woman who didn't want me. That was a woman who wanted me to have a chance, even if she couldn't be part of it. It's been 8 months since that conversation in my apartment. Margaret and I meet for coffee every other Wednesday at a quiet place halfway between Cincinnati and Columbus. Sometimes we talk about deep things. Her therapy, which she started again after our first meeting. My own sessions with a counselor, working through the complicated grief and anger and understanding that comes with learning your origin story. Sometimes we just talk about normal things, like our jobs or the weather or books we've read. She's working her way through the stack of recommendations I gave her, and I'm reading the novels she loved as a teenager, trying to understand who she was before everything broke. We're learning each other slowly, carefully, building something from scratch that doesn't have a name yet. Not quite mother and son, not just friends. Something new, something that acknowledges the pain while reaching toward healing. I met my half-siblings last month. Margaret told them the truth, a simplified version, but the truth nonetheless. She sat them down one Sunday afternoon and said, "When I was 17, something terrible happened to me. I got pregnant, and I wasn't able to keep the baby. I gave him up because I thought it was the best thing for him. That baby was your brother, and he's found me, and I'd like you to meet him." Emma, my half-sister, the one I'd seen that first Saturday morning, took it hard. She's 16, the same age Margaret had been when everything fell apart. "How could you keep that secret?" she demanded. "Did Dad know? Does he know now? Your father knows now. I told him everything, and he's still here, still loves me, still supports me. The secret was mine to carry, and I'm sorry it affected you. But David is your brother, and he's a good person, and I hope you'll give him a chance." My half-brother Tyler is 12 and took it with the adaptability of kids that age. "So I have a brother? Cool. Does he like video games?" We met at a park, neutral territory. It was awkward at first. Emma kept her distance, watching me with suspicious eyes, trying to reconcile this stranger with the brother she'd never known she had. Tyler asked a million questions, most of which I couldn't answer. Richard, Margaret's husband, shook my hand firmly and said, "This is a lot to process, but your family. We'll figure it out. He's a good man, better than Margaret probably thought she deserved when she married him. He knows everything now. Well, not the details of the rape. Margaret kept that vague, just said she'd been assaulted. But he knows about me, about why she gave me up, and he's standing by her, holding her hand through the hard conversations, giving her space when she needs it." Emma came around eventually. The turning point was when she found me sitting alone on a bench at their house during a family barbecue, our second meeting, and I'd felt overwhelmed by the normalcy of it all, by the family dynamics I'd never been part of. She sat down next to me, not saying anything for a while. Then, quietly, she cries sometimes at night. I hear her through the wall. She never used to do that before you came back. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. I didn't mean to hurt her. Or any of you. That's not what I mean. Emma picked at a thread on her jeans. "She's crying, but it's different. It's like, I don't know, like something that was infected is finally draining. Does that make sense?" "Yeah, it does. She seems lighter somehow, even though she's sad, like she's been carrying something heavy and she finally put it down." Emma looked at me then, really looked at me. "You have her eyes. Did you know that? I have his nose too," I said before I could stop myself. "Whose?" "No one. Never mind." But Emma was sharp. "The man who hurt her. That's who you mean, isn't it? That's why she couldn't keep you." I didn't answer, but she didn't need me to. "That's fucked up," she said quietly. "Sorry. I know I'm not supposed to curse, but it is. None of this was your fault, and none of it was hers either, but you both got punished for it anyway." "Yeah," I said. "That's exactly what it is." She bumped my shoulder with hers, a gesture so casual and familiar it made my throat tight. "Well, You're here now, so we might as well make the best of it. Tyler really does want to know if you play video games, by the way. He's been bugging me to ask you. I'm terrible at them, I admitted, but I'm willing to learn. Good enough. She stood up, brushed off her jeans. Come on, let's go back before Mom thinks we're out here plotting against her or something. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, I've been to 3 family dinners, helped Tyler with his math homework over video chat, and listened to Emma complain about boys and her friends and the unfairness of her curfew. Normal sibling stuff that feels both foreign and wonderful. The anger hasn't disappeared completely. Some days I still feel it, sharp and bitter, wondering about all the years we lost. Some days Margaret retreats into herself, and I know she's back there, trapped in that room with the blue and white lamp, reliving her nightmare. Those are the days we give each other space, send brief text messages that say, thinking of you, or bad day today, and nothing more. But there are good days too, days when Margaret laughs at something I say, and I see glimpses of who she might have been if her father hadn't destroyed her. Days when Tyler beats me at yet another video game and trash talks me with the confidence of a kid who knows he's loved. Days when Emma texts me memes she thinks I'll find funny, including me in her life without making a big deal of it. I still call Mary and Tom Mom and Dad. That hasn't changed and never will. They gave me everything that mattered. Love, stability, the foundation of who I am. When I told them I'd found Margaret, that I was building a relationship with her, Mary cried and held me tight. We always knew this day might come, she said. We hoped it would, actually. Everyone deserves to know where they came from. You're still my parents, I told her firmly. That doesn't change. We know, sweetie. We know. But there's room in your life for more love. There's always room for more love. She was right. There's room now for Margaret, too. For this complicated, painful relationship we're building from scratch. There's room for Emma's skepticism, and Tyler's easy acceptance, and Richard's steady presence. There's room for all of it. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive Margaret. I'm not sure that's even the right question. But I'm learning that understanding can exist without forgiveness, and that sometimes the people who hurt us were also hurt themselves. Were doing the best they could with broken pieces and no good options. The cycle of pain has to break somewhere, and maybe it breaks when we choose to see each other as humans first. Flawed, wounded, trying our best with what we have. Margaret gave me something else last week, on our Wednesday coffee date. An envelope, thick with papers. What's this? I asked. Letters, she said quietly. I wrote you letters. Not many, maybe 1 or 2 a year. On your birthday mostly. Sometimes on Mother's Day, which always felt ironic. I never planned to give them to you, but I needed to say things, even if you'd never hear them. I think maybe you should have them now. I opened the envelope that night in my apartment. 30 letters. Some on nice stationery. Some on notebook paper. Some stained with what could only be tears. I read them in order, watching Margaret age through her handwriting, watching her grief evolve from raw to scarred, to something resembling acceptance. Dear baby, I don't know what they named you, but I call you baby in my head. You're 1 year old today. I wonder if you're walking yet. I wonder if you're happy. I hope whoever has you reads to you every night. I hope they sing to you the way my mother sang to me. I hope you never, ever know what fear feels like. Happy birthday, baby. I love you. I'm sorry. Dear son, you're 5 today. Starting kindergarten, maybe. I saw a little boy on the playground near my apartment and wondered if that's what you look like now. He had dark hair like mine. He was laughing, running, so full of life. I hope you laugh like that. I hope you run like that. I hope you're not afraid. I still love you. I always will. Dear David, I found out your name. I hired someone to find you, just to know you existed, to know you were real. David, it's a good name. Strong. You're 10 now. Double digits. Are you good at math? Do you like sports? Do you have friends? I hope you have friends. I hope someone is there when you skin your knee or fail a test or get your heart broken for the first time. I can't be there, but I hope someone is. Happy birthday, David. I love you. Mom, I don't have the right to call myself that, but just for this letter, I will. The letters went on, chronicling my life from her imagination. When I turned 16, she wrote about hoping I'd passed my driver's test. When I turned 18, she wrote about hoping I'd gotten into a good college. When I turned 25, She wrote about hoping I'd found love, found purpose, found peace. The last letter was dated 3 months ago, before I'd shown up at her door. Dear David, you're 30 today. A man now, fully grown. I wonder if you've thought about finding me. Part of me hopes you have. Part of me hopes you haven't. I don't know which outcome scares me more. If you're reading this somehow, if fate or miracles brought this to you, I want you to know. I think about you every day. I have loved you every day of your life. Even though I gave up the right to show you that love, you deserved better than me, better than the circumstances of your conception, better than a mother too broken to keep you. But wherever you are, whoever raised you, I hope they loved you the way I couldn't. I hope you're happy. That's all I've ever wanted. Happy birthday, David. I love you. I will always love you, even if you never know it, even if I never get to tell you. Your mother, Margaret. I sat on my couch and cried reading those letters. Cried for the girl who'd written them, for the baby who'd never received them, for all the years of love that had existed in silence. The next Wednesday, I brought them with me to coffee. Margaret saw the envelope and went pale. You read them? All of them. Multiple times. I'm sorry. They're probably pathetic. A woman talking to a ghost, to a child who didn't exist in her life. They're not pathetic. They're proof that you loved me, that you always loved me, that I wasn't abandoned because I wasn't wanted, but because you wanted me to have more than you could give. I reached across the table and took her hand, the first time I'd initiated physical contact with her. Thank you for writing them. Thank you for loving me, even when you couldn't show it. She gripped my hand like a lifeline, tears streaming down her face. I meant every word. I know now. We sat there in that coffee shop, holding hands across the table, two people connected by trauma and blood and love that had survived 30 years of separation. The other customers probably thought we were a mother and son having a nice afternoon together. They had no idea of the complicated journey that had brought us to this moment. And maybe that was okay. Maybe we didn't have to explain our story to anyone else. Maybe it was enough that we knew it, that we were living it, that we were choosing every day to build something new from the wreckage of the past. Last week, Margaret asked me if I wanted to meet her therapist with her. I've been working through some things, she said, about my father, about what happened, about you, and Dr. Chen, no relation to your Tom and Mary, different Chen. She thinks it might help if you came to a session, only if you're comfortable with it. Why? I asked. Because there are things I need to say to you that I can't seem to say anywhere else. Things about him, about that time, about why I made the choices I made. And I think having someone there to help navigate it might make it easier for both of us. I agreed. The session was yesterday. I sat in a comfortable chair in a sun-filled office while Margaret sat on the couch, twisting her hands together. Dr. Chen, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, sat between us. David, Margaret has told me a lot about you and about your reunion, Dr. Chen began. She's been doing important work around her trauma and her choices. I think she has some things she'd like to share with you, in this safe space. Margaret took a shaky breath. I need you to know that when I found out I was pregnant, my first thought was to end it. The pregnancy, everyone would have understood. Even the Catholic social worker who was assigned to my case said she'd help me get access to services if that's what I wanted. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, but I couldn't do it. Not because of religion or morality or anything like that, but because... She paused, tears already streaming down her face. Because you were the only thing in my life right then that was innocent. You were the only thing that hadn't been touched by his violence. Yes, you came from violence, but you yourself were innocent. And I thought maybe if I could give you life, give you a chance, then maybe something good could come from all that horror. Margaret, I said softly, but she shook her head. Let me finish. Please. She wiped her eyes. Carrying you was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every day I felt you move, I remembered. Every doctor's appointment, every milestone. It all reminded me. I couldn't eat. I barely slept. The foster family I lived with was worried I'd hurt myself, but I kept going because you deserved a chance at life. You deserved to exist. And then I gave birth to you, and they put you in my arms, and you were so perfect, so tiny and perfect and innocent. And I looked at you, and I felt love, real, overwhelming love, not what I expected to feel. I expected to feel revulsion or fear, but all I felt was love. She was sobbing now, barely able to get the words out. "So why did you leave me?" I asked, my own voice breaking. Because 2 days later, I looked at you again and saw his nose, his eyes, his hands, and I had a panic attack so severe they thought I was having a seizure. I realized that I could love you and still not be able to keep you. That love wasn't enough to overcome trauma. And I knew if I kept you, you'd grow up with a mother who flinched when you reached for her, who saw a monster when she looked at you, who couldn't separate you from what he'd done. What kind of life would that have been for you? "So you chose for me," I said, and there was no accusation in it, just a statement of fact. I chose for you. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have tried harder, gotten more therapy, pushed through it. But I was 17 and broken, and I made the best choice I could with what I had. I gave you to people who could love you without trauma getting in the way, and I've regretted it, and been grateful for it every day since. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "David, how do you feel hearing this?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Sad," I said finally, "for both of us, for what we lost, but also grateful. Not grateful for what happened to her, never that, but grateful that she loved me enough to make an impossible choice. Grateful that she gave me life even when it cost her so much. Grateful that she's here now, telling me the truth, even though it hurts." "Can you forgive her?" Dr. Chen asked gently. "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word for what I feel. It's more like understanding, acceptance, recognition that she did the best she could in an impossible situation, that she's human, not a villain, that we're both victims of the same monster, just in different ways." Margaret looked at me with such hope and pain mixed together. "Is that enough? Understanding without forgiveness?" "I think it might be more than enough," I said. "I think it might be exactly what we need." The session went on for another hour. We talked about boundaries and expectations, about how to navigate our relationship going forward, about what healing might look like for both of us. Dr. Chen gave us tools and strategies, ways to communicate when things got hard, permission to take breaks when we needed them. As we walked out to the parking lot afterward, Margaret stopped me. "Thank you," she said, "for coming, for listening, for trying. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth. All of it, not just the easy parts." "There are no easy parts," she said with a sad smile. "No," I agreed, "but we're doing it anyway." She hugged me then, just briefly, just long enough for me to smell her perfume and feel how small she was, how fragile, and I hugged her back. This woman who'd given me life twice, once when she carried me despite everything, and once when she let me go. I don't know what the future holds for us. This isn't a fairy tale where everything gets tied up neatly with a bow. Margaret still has bad days where the past overwhelms her. I still have moments of anger and grief for the childhood we could have had together. Emma is still processing having a brother who appeared out of nowhere. Tyler treats the whole thing like an adventure, which is probably the healthiest response of all of us. But we're trying. That's what matters. We're showing up, doing the hard work, choosing connection over safety, truth over comfort. Mary told me last week that she's proud of me. "Not everyone could do what you're doing," she said. "Building a relationship with someone who hurt you, even unintentionally, that takes courage and compassion." "She hurt too," I said. "Maybe more than me. Pain isn't a competition, sweetie. You both suffered. You're both healing. And that's beautiful." She's right. It is beautiful. In a complicated, messy, wholly imperfect way. Beautiful like a broken bone that heals stronger. Beautiful like a scar that tells a story of survival. I keep the photo Margaret gave me on my bookshelf now, next to the one of Mary and Tom. My before and my after. The pain and the healing. The question and the beginning of an answer. Sometimes I look at that baby in the yellow blanket and think about everything he didn't know was coming. The confusion, the anger, the searching, but also the love from Mary and Tom, the life they built for him, the man he'd become, and now, finally, the truth that sets him free. Margaret texted me this morning. "Thank you for existing. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I love you." I texted back. "I love you too, Mom." It's the first time I've called her that. It feels strange and right all at once. She's not my mom the way Mary is. That bond is different, built on years of daily love and presence. But she's my mother in her own way, the woman who gave me life and loved me enough to let me go. That's enough. Maybe it's more than enough. Maybe it's everything. If this story reached something in you, I hope you'll share it. Share it with someone who's wrestling with their own complicated past, their own questions that don't have easy answers. Share it with someone who needs to hear that understanding doesn't require perfection, that families can be built and rebuilt, that it's never too late to start again. Share it with someone who's carrying shame that isn't theirs to carry, with someone who made impossible choices and has been punishing themselves ever since, with someone who's searching for answers and needs to know that sometimes the truth is more complicated and more human than we imagined. And if you're here for the first time, stay with us. Subscribe to Every Smile Hides a Story, too, because every day we're uncovering the hidden depths in people's lives, the pain that shapes us, the choices that define us, and the courage it takes to face the truth, no matter how complicated it might be. Some stories don't end neatly, but they're worth hearing anyway, maybe especially then, because real life isn't about perfect resolutions. It's about people doing their best with broken pieces, choosing love over fear, choosing truth over comfortable lies. We're all carrying something. The question is whether we'll carry it alone, letting it crush us slowly, or whether we'll find the courage to set it down, together, and see what grows from the wreckage. I'm learning that love isn't always loud and obvious. Sometimes it's quiet and complicated. Sometimes it's a teenage girl carrying a baby she can't keep, writing letters she'll never send. Sometimes it's foster parents who love a child like he's their own, who give him everything without asking for anything in return. Sometimes it's half-siblings who make room in their lives for a stranger who shares their blood. Sometimes love means letting go, and sometimes it means reaching back across 30 years of silence and saying, "I'm here. I'm listening. Tell me your truth, and I'll tell you mine. And maybe together, we can build something new." That's what we're doing, Margaret and I. Building something new from old pain. Planting hope in ground that's been scorched by trauma. It's slow work. Some days it feels impossible, but we keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing each other even when it's hard. And that, I'm learning, is what family really means. Not perfection, not the absence of pain, but the choice to stay, to try, to love even when it's complicated. The baby on the church steps is 30 years old now. He's found his answers. He's found his mother. And he's found that some stories don't end. They just begin again, in a new chapter, with hope that wasn't there before. That's enough. That's everything. That's the story. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, every smile hides a story. Every person carries more than you can see. Be kind. Be curious. Be willing to hear the complicated truth beneath the surface. Because sometimes the people who hurt us were hurting too, and sometimes the greatest act of love is recognizing our shared humanity, our shared brokenness, and choosing connection anyway. See you in the next story.